Thank you, Alison. I think you'll agree, some really interesting and comprehensive talks from some true experts. Now, this is a bit where I look to Charles, because I've got to earn my keep now and try to get a little bit of reinforcement, but also challenge these people in the brief time we have left with some overview thoughts. And I think the way I'll do this is to simply put to each of you in turn, I'd like to ask the question, what do you think is the biggest thing holding us back in making progress for methane reduction through genetics, and in particular in doing so outside the rich countries of North America and Europe and Australasia, basically. Now, every one of you's got a microphone, and Matt's already ready, so you can start. You've got about a minute each.
Okay. Yeah, so I don't think the answer is different for a methane trait versus any other traits we're interested in, right? The barrier continues to be phenotyping. And I think we tend to think of, okay, well, there's these new cool phenotypes like methane that we need to figure out how to phenotype a lot of animals. But we have lots and lots of phenotypes that relate to production traits that we've always liked that we still struggle to phenotype. When we started our programs to look at beef on dairy, for example, there were no phenotypes for beef on dairy cattle of any kind, right? Whether we want to select for growth or feed efficiency, much less things that directly influence environmental impact like methane. And so I think that continues to be an issue, and we have to find ways to scale up those sorts of phenotypes for both traits like methane, but also the production traits that go along with it, so that when we build these breeding programs, we're making progress on environmental impact, but we're not sacrificing things like productivity, because we absolutely can't do that in a commercial breeding program. And really to the point of, how do we disseminate that, Rob? I think that's a really difficult question, right? And because obviously, we've had challenges for many years on how do we get that genetic improvement from the more developed systems and, into the rest of the world. And I think the opportunity to sort of select at that nucleus level and then really drive that improvement where we can in given systems, I think is a big opportunity. But as Troy pointed out, driving that into the female side of the equation due to G by E is really challenging. I don't really have an answer for that.
Thank you, Matt. Yvette?
Well, a lot I will echo what Matthew said. I also think it's important. I think in the developed countries, the breeding program is so far in place that we can start focusing on other traits, whereas like in the developing countries, I think a lot of focus can still be on production and improving efficiency there. But for that, we also need to know where the animals are, who is each animal, what is the pedigree of the animal. So we need also have a good registration of all the different animals and all the production traits, or maybe traits that are a bit easier to record on a larger scale.
Thank you, Yvette. Troy?
Yeah, I'll sound like a broken record, but phenotyping and integration of those phenotypes, making them useful is really important. So whether you're in, again, the US or the Netherlands or Uruguay, right, capturing phenotypes more directly on methane, those higher quality phenotypes, supplementing them also maybe with an indicator trait here or there. So finding those novel indicator traits, I'd love to have a milk sample on my cow to shoot some lasers at and get an estimate on methane, but I'm not going out and milking beef cows. So again, finding useful indicators, I think, is going to be very important. And just as Yvette said, as we get to the global south and in developing countries, just getting a scale into a stockyard. We do some work in East Africa, and there's a lot of productivity gains that we can make there, recording females' reproductive efficiency. So again, lots of meat on the bone in various different ways that we can address this, but it all comes back to how do you capture phenotypes, tie them to an individual. Genomics helps us speed it up, but ultimately it takes a big cooperation of producers and other like-minded folks to get genetic selection tools out in folks' hands.
Thank you, Troy. Alison?
Well, I showed the ice cream sundae somewhat facetiously. However, the ice cream sundae is pretty important because without a structured breeding program and a breeding objective, how do you accelerate the rate of genetic gain? And just getting that in place in some of the developing countries is problematic. And sometimes the breeding objective may have nothing to do with methane traits, shockingly. It might be they're used for draft purposes or for other purposes. I mean, cattle serve a multitude of purposes. And so getting that balance right in terms of why are those animals being raised in the first place, it may not always be for efficient beef production or efficient milk production. They've got so many other attributes that we need to be careful of because they may look unproductive to our eye, but actually they may be fulfilling a very important role in that production system.
Thank you. Ellie.
Well, two things. It's true that, nobody is going to start a breeding program starting with methane. That's clear. That's not the starting point. You need to build up lots of things before thinking about including methane in the breeding programs. In the projects and the collaborations that we are working with other institutes in the region, in Argentina, Uruguay, Brazil, and other countries, Colombia too, Mexico, there are breeding programs in place and genetic evaluation systems recording the basic phenotypes. I'm talking birth weight, weaning weight, yearling weight, all this information that is easy, even compared to ultrasound measurements that I'm old enough to know the beginning and starting collecting that data that was very challenging at the time in the 90s. Well, methane in grazing conditions is much difficult than collecting ultrasound for carcass traits in any place. So actually for me, of course, we cannot start thinking about spreading genetics, thinking just only on methane. In the developing country and in the not developing country, because methane is just one more trait that we need to add to the breeding programs and put together with other breeding objectives. But for me, measuring methane in real conditions in grazing pastures is really a challenging measure, and it's actually very expensive. If you put together the cost of measuring methane per animal versus the cost of genotyping is also the rounding figure in the total cost of developing platform for methane. So that's why it's so relevant to do this together, not just doing together, but planning in advance to work this together in genetically connected populations. That's what I think about.
Thank you, Ellie. We've discussed amongst ourselves whether we should take the rest of the conference to talk about genetic approaches, but unfortunately, for some reason, we're not allowed to. But these people will be around, and I really encourage you to interact with them. There's extraordinary range of experience and expertise from around the world, and I'm sure as the conference unfolds, you'll see lots of opportunities to see how genetics works with other approaches, and these people will be really great to talk to about that. I'd like to finish with just a couple of kind of summary comments. It's quite clear genetic work to tackle methane is underway to varying extents in many places. So the ball has started rolling, if you like, or the wheel has started turning, and we're really keen to find out how to make it work as well as possible, as widely as possible, but it is underway, which is really encouraging. Genetic improvement is a really safe, reliable way of tackling this problem, and every one of the speakers has talked about the importance of balancing selection against methane with other things, so it's not just let's breed animals that produce no methane, for instance, and not worry about anything else. Balanced selection indexes are a really, really effective, safe, and powerful tool. Two really important messages that everybody should take home about what we need for genetic improvement is clear signals. The faster we can get really good signals coming back to breeders, no matter what country it is, about what the dollar effect or the whatever currency it is, what people are going to get paid for reducing methane will help clarify how much pressure to put on methane and how fast we can make progress in it. Having said that, breeders are basically always in the business of predicting the future, and by and large, they do a reasonably good job of it. But anything we can do to help that by getting clearer and clearer signals will be really valuable. And the other, of course, is finding sustainable ways to fund the collection of phenotypes. Every single person on the panel has talked about phenotypes. There's a famous international colleague who basically always just says phenotype, 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 and phenotype is king. That is true. If you remember nothing else about genetics from this conference, we just need more phenotypes. But I'm struck by the fact that it's really nice to be here. It's kind of a sense of what I'm thinking of as sort of, it's the equivalent of a global moonshot program, except it's a global methane reduction program. Genetics will be a key contribution, but it won't be the only thing. And the more we work out how to integrate genetics with the other approaches and make genetics as effective as possible, the better we will all be, and our children and grandchildren and so on. But to finish up, thank you for a wonderful panel of speakers. Please join me in thanking them.